Well, good morning, and it's Thursday once again. Another week going flying by. I'm really amazed during this time of lockdown and social distancing and life being very different, of a number of emotions and things that I'm noticing. One is I'm noticing stuff. So, I mean, I've just been having a cup of tea in the front of the house, looking out on the garden, and it struck me how green the grass was. And then I saw a bird come and land on our bird bath that we bought a couple of months back, and watched it sort of pecking away, then jumped down onto the garden and pecked away, and then flew off. Um, and then the thought struck me, I would never usually notice that stuff. I would never usually notice that stuff going on, and yet it's going on all the time. But my perception of it has changed during this time. That can't be a bad thing. I'm also aware of time seeming to go quicker than usual. I mean, I woke up this morning and was typing in my diary for the day, and Thursday, the 9th of July. How could it be Thursday in another week? And how could it be the 9th of July? Nearly a third of the way through July already. And the beginning of September and all the new stuff that's going to be happening in some way for us as Methodist people in this part of the country, and my part in that, I was just suddenly going, this is all happening. So there is a sense of time going faster, and also with that vividness of life and vividness of time. There's also that vividness of things sticking out when I'm reading them in a book or reading them in the Bible, and having greater clarity. Someone sent me an email last night that normally I would try and be very thoughtful about and try and think, but I just had a clarity right away. This is not right, and wrote back, "This is not right." And other times, like a piece I'm going to share with you in a few moments, um, just feeling that God's speaking through it, and so I was aware of the spiritual antennae being more attuned than usual. So, those are some of my reflections as I start sharing with you today. Let me share with you a prayer from someone called Richard Crawshaw. He was a poet from the early 1600s, and his prayer is in today's Methodist Prayer Handbook. And then we'll pray a prayer from the Cumbria district, who we're focusing on today, by James Tibbet, who used to work over here in the Sheffield district. And we remember him and the Cumbria district today. And as we're doing so, we'll also think of Argentina, Brazil, Colombia, and Venezuela. And we'll also have a prayer from John Bailey. So I invite you to join me in prayer. Let us pray. Jesus, by your wounded feet, direct our path. Jesus, by your nailed hands, move us to deeds of love. Jesus, by your pierced side, purify our desires. Jesus, by your broken heart, knit ours to yours. Amen. And so we do think of the wider world. It's good for our attention to go to other places and not just to be focused on our own church or community or lives, but that all the world belongs to God and all its peoples. And so that part of the world we call Argentina, we lift to God in our prayers. That part we call Brazil, Colombia, Venezuela. Those are massive parts of the world's surface, of the Earth's surface. That's a massive part of the world we're playing for today in South or Latin America. So we hold the people of God, those communities, their experiences of life, of the riches of life and poverty. We lift to you today the Cumbria district, and we join with James Tibbet's prayer. Loving God, you call us to respond, to receive, and to let go, and invite us to trust your gospel call, your gospel way, and your gospel life. wherever life is full, joy is deep, and grace abundant, or where these gifts are yet glimpsed and yearned for, help us to let go and take up, to give and to receive, and in all our ventures and deliberations, to be inspired and guided by the dying and rising of your Son, our Shepherd, Saviour, and Companion. Thus may we come to rest in your eternal self-giving love, glimpsed in beauty, received in kindness, made known in fellowship with you and one another, enduring forever in our hills, valleys, and dwelling places. Amen. And then a prayer today from John Bailey, today the 9th day of the month. Here I am, O God, humbly yours, lifting up my heart to you, before whom all created things are as dust and mist. You are hidden behind the curtain of our limited sight and hearing, incomprehensible in your greatness, mysterious in your almighty power. Yet here I am, speaking to you with the familiarity of a child to a parent, a friend to a friend. If I could not speak to you like this, then I would indeed be without hope in the world. I have little power to do or control anything. It is not by my will that I am here or will one day pass away. Of all that will come to me today, very little will have been what I have chosen for myself. It is you, O hidden one, who has given me my heritage, and you determined the place of my birth. It is you who have given me the power to do one kind of work and have withheld the skill to do another. It is you who hold in your hand the threads of this day's life, and you alone who know what lies before me to do or to suffer. But because you are my Father, I am not afraid. Because it is your Spirit that stirs within my heart's most secret room, I know that all is well. What I desire for myself I cannot achieve, but whatever you desire in me, you can help me to achieve. The good that I want to do, I fail to do, but you can give me the power to do good. Dear Father, take this day's life into your keeping, guide all my thoughts and feelings, direct all my energies, instruct my mind, sustain my will. Take my hands and give me the skill to serve you. Take my feet and make them quick to do whatever you ask. Take my eyes and keep them fixed on your everlasting beauty. Take my mouth and give me the words to tell others of your love. Make this day a day of obedience, a day of spiritual joy and peace. Make this day's work a little part of the work of the kingdom of my Lord Jesus, in whose name these prayers are said. Amen. Amen. I do love those prayers by John Bailey. They're so rich, and I always find them helpful. I hope you do too. I'm taking a break today from the Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Module 1.2, Theological Reflections on Equality, Diversity and Inclusion. That title just trips off the tongue. But I'm reading a book at the moment called Weird Church. Now, let me tell you a little bit about Weird Church. It's written by a guy called Paul Nixon and by a lady called Beth Eastock. They're from America, and they're both Methodists, and they're both people who are coaches to clergy and church leaders all over the world. I know Paul particularly because Paul and Beth have been asked to take part in a connectional pilot on coaching church leaders this year, and I was asked to take part, partly because I have a background in training as a consultant in non-directive consultancy in church and community work. I also have other trainings and things like supervision, mentoring, etc., which are particular courses and trainings I've done in postgraduate work over the years and trained others in them. And this coaching module model, I said I'd be involved in to sort of help reflect upon it and its usefulness. And part of the blessing of that has been Paul Nixon, one of the authors of this book, has been my coach throughout the year. We talk on Zoom once a month. Before Zoom was a thing, I was already using Zoom, and now we do nothing but Zooms from morning to night. But part of that conversation each month is focusing on a particular part of my ministry, and he's been a real blessing to me, helping thinking that through. But his book is something that I've read and enjoyed, and a couple of other people who have read the book said, "Gosh, could we study this book together?" So through the joys of Zoom, I meet with two people in Sheffield and somebody way down on the south coast near Exeter, Exmouth area, on a weekly basis, just making our way through this book for an hour in an evening at the end of the day. And this week I'm preparing for next week. And I thought I would just read to you today, something completely different than what we used to do. I would just read to you today what he says. And he's reflecting in a chapter that's about moving from how we communicate presently to how he thinks we're going to communicate in the future. So every revolution, this is from Paul Nixon, every revolution in media has been followed by revolutions in the church as well. Don't think for a minute that we are going to make it through the latest media revolution without an unprecedented corresponding revolution in the way we do faith. The Gutenberg printing press with movable type was invented in the 1440s. In the years that passed from Gutenberg's era to Martin Luther's Reformation in 1517, the printing industry expanded and improved to the point where books became more affordable and people began learning how to read. Without the use of this technology, Martin Luther could not have pulled off a revolution on the scale of the Reformation. The printing press was used for the publication of propaganda against the Catholic Church and also provided notices alerting people to debates and rallies. It was the medium that produced thousands of Luther's pamphlets, which were in turn distributed throughout Germany to France. More importantly, the printing press shifted people's consciousness toward a more democratic way of engaging in Christian practice. This movement that began in Europe continued in the form of the Great Awakenings in the newly formed United States. These uniquely American movements advocated for the idea of individual salvation and free will instead of predestination. They greatly increased the number of Christians in both New England and across the frontier. It is interesting to note that the invention of the telegraph in 1851 and then the telephone in 1861 marked the end of the Great Awakening movements, as well as the use of circuit riders to spread Christianity to distant settlements of people. The next great revolution, media revolution, moved from one-to-one conversations to one-to-many broadcasts in the form of movies, radio and TV from the 1920s to the 1950s. By the 1960s, most American homes had televisions that gave shape to how we see, experience, interpret, and express our world. It brought into our living rooms the civil rights movement, JFK's and MLK's assassinations, and the war in Vietnam. It dismantled the modern perspective. It dismantled the modern perspective of order and predictability, introducing us to the fluid and fragmented experiences of postmodernity. Woodstock, civil rights, feminism, sit-ins, and free love epitomized the beginning of the postmodern movement. The church mostly rejected this shift by recommitting itself to preserving the paradigm of absolute truth and the objective reality that it alone is privileged to define. However, it did take on the container of the broadcast medium with the rise of the professional pastor and megachurches. It makes sense that the church as we know it today finds its comfort zone in a world shaped by movies, radio, and TV. It is not a far leap to think about a Sunday morning worship service as a professional broadcast news program with the preacher as the professional journalist. Just like a journalist, the pastor is schooled in the tradition and has learned the craft of communicating the truth. The professionally trained pastor almost unilaterally decides what message from a reliable news source, the Bible, to broadcast to a congregation. The audience receives and trusts this message as much as they did Walter Cronkite, the CBS news anchor from the 1960s to the 1980s. Cronkite always ended his broadcast with the line, "And that's the way it is." And all the people sitting in living rooms all around America nodded, "Amen." This is one-way communication to the many. Likewise, the preacher as broadcaster hopes that the message will captivate and entertain the audience so that they will tune in again. In more recent adaptations, the broadcaster is more like Oprah than Cronkite, but still there is broadcast management control over what shall be presented and taught. The object with almost every broadcast model is to get butts in seats so that the pastor can communicate the truth to as many people as possible. Large worship spaces are essential, often in multiple locations, to maximize the one-to-one many mode of communication. In this paradigm, vitality is measured in terms of worship attendance, viewership, financial revenues, and volume of programs. The pastor, like Oprah, is often CEO, executive producer, and headliner personality, and the process is one excellence in presentation and programming. The new church start model that works in this scenario is to start small groups that can eventually feed into support and launch of a large Sunday morning gathering. The church planter strives to launch a new worship service with at least 200 attendees in order to build enough financial capacity to support the infrastructure that produces the worship experience. The music has to be good. In recent years, really good. In many ways, it is a show that is meant to captivate us and bring us back next week and the week after that. The chapter goes on, and I mean, of course, it's written in an American context, but it seems to me that the main point is that changes in how we communicate often lead to significant changes in how we do church. And I think his reflections on the way we organised around church and thinking of it as Sunday services being like broadcasts, I think that's really quite important for us to grab. Let me read this next little bit of the chapter. Broadcast church, aka the Sunday show, is now a shrinking game in the United States. By mid-century, only a tiny elite of preachers will be good enough or savvy enough in marketing and technology to pull it off and attract followers. A very small number of highly gifted pastors with increasingly large audiences, and it will be increasingly internet focused. And this is before the pandemic. Just as the internet and social media have disrupted the news industry, both paper and broadcast, they have also disrupted the church. An exploding social media universe of interaction has distracted and enticed hundreds of millions of people beyond the confines of being as a regular viewer for any professional broadcast message. Ratings are falling across the board, whether you are the President of the United States, who still delivers a weekly Saturday broadcast on radio that no one listens to. Social media gives people multiple platforms for sharing ideas, organising movements, seeking support, asking questions, convening groups, making money, and watching the latest cat videos. We discovered in the Arab Spring, in Egypt, etc., that when anyone can be a reporter of the news as it is happening, movements can begin. Those movements can be as playful as a flash mob and as inspiring as a regime change. Messy for sure, but filled with the spirit. Social media empowers people to be full participants in the unfolding stories of their world. Now everyone has his or her own grasp of truth to share with multiple platforms to use. Some package it up rather nicely in ways that others find compelling. There's no license, no ordination, no referee, and no traffic cop on earth able to control all the world views or parallel experiences of reality being shared in a given hour around the globe. It is enough to drive a medieval archbishop crazy. Anybody with a little style and something to say can become a YouTube sensation. Postmodernity has taken hold in the form of contextualized truth. In this digital age, many people increasingly wonder about the relevancy of the old broadcast model church. Why give money to support the overhead of the church when you can organise a meetup group in a park or a coffee shop on your schedule? Why sit through a sermon when you can listen to an inspiring TED Talk while taking a walk or sitting on your back patio? Why drive in traffic to a meeting when you can create a Google Hangout with friends or a Zoom meeting from all over the world and sit in your pajamas Why watch a movie in a theatre when you can access it on your TV at home? It is time to expand our working assumptions about church and look to the creative ways the newspapers have survived in the social media world. But even more than that, we need to look at digital media platforms as a new way of reimagining communities of faithful practice. The few newspapers that are thriving today have adapted, innovated, and transformed. And they've only just begun. The New York Times created an idea lab and slowly began testing ways to gain audience and add revenue online. In 2006, they launched a mobile website. In 2007, they experimented with driving readers to their site through Twitter. In 2010, the Times began to hire bloggers who drove 20% more people to their site. In 2012, they published interactive storytelling experience using many media formats. In 2014, they launched NYT Now, which is a mobile app with customized ads. In 2015, they launched a virtual reality platform that will transform the way we experience stories. They are now requiring their journalists to participate in digital boot camps in order to keep up with how to use and navigate media trends. Adapting, innovating, and transforming have been keywords that the institutional church has used when addressing the decline in people and money, but talk is only as good as the paper is printed on. Instead of managing the decline as many out of print newspapers chose to do, the church could decide to create funded ideas labs, engage in transformative scenario planning, and support weird church innovation. One key to the church becoming relevant again is releasing its death grip on the broadcast church model. Newspapers have discovered that the typical adult uses 4 different technologies to access news every week: online, print, mobile, and social media. They have found that all of their digital circulations are growing exponentially, yet the church continues to invest in the broadcast print model as the only game in town. This is not simply about creating a great website with video, media, blogs, and links to Instagram and Twitter in order to entice people to church on Sunday morning for a broadcast production. Rather, it's about reconfiguring church as a platform for creating environments for convening and supporting groups that want to grow virtually and learn more about Jesus, both virtually and in real time. Oh, I'm so tempted to keep reading that chapter the whole way through to the end, but it's hard enough for me to read it, and that's my 3rd or 4th time reading it, and you're listening to it. You can replay this a few times. The basic premise is that we're moving from a world that has been very much dominated by one particular way of communicating and one particular way of being church, and we are in a moment. I believe we're in a moment when this is all going to radically change. What it looks like going forward, we have no idea. But no idea is about leaving Haran and making your way to the promised land. No idea is about making your way out of Egypt across a Red Sea and into the wilderness. No idea is about crossing the Jordan into the promised land. No idea is many stories in the Old Testament and indeed in the New Testament. No idea is Paul and his friends leaving the comfort of Antioch and heading off onto their mission. The scriptures call it faith, and faith could be spelled R-I-S-K. I invite you just to listen to what I've shared today a few times over from Paul Nixon's book and Beth Eastock's book, and think about what it's saying to us today. Because what it says to me, if I'm honest, is that it's not enough for me just to play around with doing daily devotions or Sunday broadcasts of services on YouTube or Zoom services or Facebook Lives and all those things. The hope being that one day you'll all come down to church. No, this is church. You are in church right now. Wherever 2 or 3 are gathered. Well, there's 2 of us right now, me and you. Yes, it's virtual. Yes, it's pre-recorded that you're listening to. But right now, whoever you are, this is a moment of grace. This is a moment of church. And we will spend time, and this is a serious point, we will have a period of grief and loss and bereavement as we journey away from where we've been, old ways of doing things pre-coronavirus, and before we can step carefully into what's next with faith. there will be a part of us that will constantly say, can we not go back to Egypt? Why walk around in the sand every day? This manna is just, getting tired of it now. And those quails, once you've had one, you've had enough. We want to move into what God has next for us. But there's going to be a time in the wilderness first, this transition period, this in-between place. And I hope it doesn't last 40 years like it did for the Israelites. But I do believe that God's with us in it. And there are moments when the glory descends on the house of the Lord. And the house of the Lord right now is where you're sitting, because you are the house of the Lord. So I drop all those wonderful thoughts, radical, off the wall. You can call me crazy if you like. I'm happy for you to put on Facebook, Sean, you have lost the plot. You're nuts. I'm happy for you to do so. Or to say amen. Let's take steps together one at a time. So God bless you and have a great day, and I will see you tomorrow. God bless.